As shown in this graph by rollingdata.org, we can see a huge increase in phone ownership in children from the years 2015, 2019, and 2021. This same source cites that children from the ages of 5 to 14 are roughly 1.34 billion owners of phones, and children under 5 years old are responsible for being owners of 671 million phones. This helps us reflect, if phone ownership rises, how would increased amounts of screen time potentially affect future generations that are going to develop into becoming our next lawyers, our next caregivers, or our next president. Good morning. My name is Juan Montoya, and this is the impact of screen time on children. My research question is, to what extent does the rise in exposure to screen time affects children's mental development? My answer to this question is, a rise in exposure to screen time presents negative effects on a child's mental development, children being defined from newborn all the way to the ages of 12 to 13, and leaves negative impacts on their language development, social emotional development, and inattention problems. As provided by the College Board stimulus, we can see here Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the 32nd President of the United States, as he delivers his notorious speech, the inaugural address. Through his clear, precise, and touching words, he talks to an American population affected at this time by the Great Depression. He establishes in this speech hope and power through the way he speaks or his language. This highlights concerns in children's capability in the future to portray language and deliver powerful and meaningful speeches like the one done by FDR. But how is this going to be done if there is a decrease in language development due to the increase of screen exposure? Well, my first point is the reduction of vocalization in children. As talked about by Valentina Mastroeni from Catholic University, her research illustrates how passive screen time leads to the decrease in child vocalization from the ages 2 to 48 months old. But although she focuses her research on earlier stages of life, she depicts the development of this throughout and the long-lasting impacts it leaves on a child's development, right? It jeopardizes the child's ability to display language in a way that they desire in order to express themselves, to communicate, and to persuade other people, as in, for example, here by FDR. The decrease in vocalization of children is also a factor from the lack of two-way conversation and emotional output. As talked about by Dr. Hooden from Cincinnati Children's Hospital, he talks about how kids learn to talk if they are encouraged to talk. Very often, if they're just watching a screen, not practicing talking at all, they struggle as screens don't have an interactive component when consumed passively. This comes to the point that the lack of meaningful and real-life interaction done by the lack of two-way conversation and emotional output. Therefore, children who are not interacting due to having their attention on screens leads to the lack of stimulation and overall practicing of vocalization done by children. Language development. We can see here in this graph through 5 examples of language and how overall, as there is more screen time consumed, there are decreased levels of skill score. For example, in expressive language, when skill score is 10 to 12, when 0 time is consumed, as they consume almost 6 hours of screen time, there's approximately a 40 to 50% decrease, as there being 6 to 8 points on their skill score. My next point is social and emotional development. As talked about by Dr. Aruguman Thamari, she illustrates the environmental experiences of a child are made up of various attributes that influence early childhood development. This is essentially what it means, is that environment will affect and influence a child throughout all of their life. Therefore, we want to appropriately put children in a scenario where they optimally learn and have great conditions in order to thrive later in life. She also states how the increase in screen exposure decreases social emotional development due to the deprivation of nurturing care and caregiver-child attachment. This indicates poor mother relationship, which is associated with insecure infant attachment. This essentially means that as children are not met with the needs due to increased attention in screen time, they become increasingly distressed when separation from their parents. Therefore, they're not soothed by the reunion, increasing their anxiety also. This all leads to my next point. Less interaction with their peers. As there is increased amounts of screen time that are being consumed, there's a decreased interaction with their peers and in a social environment. Therefore, this lack of social and emotional development done from them due to there being no no interactions at all. My next point is inattention. Exceeding recommendation of daily screen time by the World Health Organization, which is 1 hour from the ages 2 to 5, 2 hours from the ages of 5 to 13, and 0 at all from 18 months and below, it shows an increased propensity of ADHD, or attention deficit hyperactive disorder, in children, as talked about by Maria Renata Silva Santos from Federal University of Minas Gerais. We can see here how these children display, especially forgetfulness, difficulty sitting still, excessive talking, and disorganization in their behavior. Another source by the Department of Pediatrics from British Columbia University talks how children exceeding screen time are 5.9 times more likely for ADHD, and children with 32 hours of screen time, increasing that they are 7.7 times more propense to have inattention problems. In this graph shown by the Key Laboratory of Brain, Cognition, and Education in partnership with the Ministry of Education in Guangzhou, China, we can see as there's an increase in screen time, especially around the ages of 2 to 3, there are more hyperactive behaviors being displayed over here. My solution to this are going to be the education of parents and children. As talked about, as seen by Screen Time Clinic, an organization that focuses on the guidance and education of both parents and children on how to have a healthy relationship with screen time. This comes to the healthy boundaries with strict and precise limitations that are going to be developed due to the new education of parents and children with screen time. And my third point is going to be the involvement in meaningful activities, as demonstrated by the organization Screen Sanity. As there is new and healthy boundaries with strict parents and precise limitations established, this new time and this new free time that children are going to have can be dedicated to the involvement in meaningful activities. Screen Sanity to the promotion of Instagram and Facebook show children healthy ways in which they can spend their free time, including game nights, reading a book, or taking a walk, a simple walk in the park, connecting with nature. My limitation to this are going to be the absence of parent engagement. As some children have no parents, some have 1, 2, or even divorced parents, the absence of parent engagement sees the overall time that the children can be dedicated to have limited time of screen exposure. My second point is the low economic stability. Children with low economic stability usually have more time with screen exposure due to their parents being away from home to provide ends meet for their children, and therefore not limiting their overall screen exposure. In conclusion, we want to create healthy relationships for future generations and to have a more well-rounded society. Thank you.
All right, 2 questions for you. One, can I get you? Yeah, perfect. All right. What information did you need before you began the whole process, and then what'd you do with that information as you found it?
First of all, the information that I needed overall was what types, and to build in categories, what types of mental development are going to be affected due to the increased exposure, right? As I developed these categories, we can see how it was easier to categorize them into different types of mental development and how they are impacted by screen time.
Okay. And what additional questions emerged as you were working your way through it?
A question I have that emerged due to the...
Just wait.
A question that emerged due to the increased exposure of screen time was what are the physical limitations that it has accompanied with the mental attributes to illustrate the overall mental well-being of a child and how it is impacted due to the increase of screen exposure.